You're listening to the podcast of The Branch in Ashland, Virginia. Where are you searching for peace? I mean, real peace. The peace that the Bible describes as God's peace is something more than just the absence of conflict. It's a transcendent peace that we can never find or achieve on our own. Today, we look at that peace and what it means for us. On March 20th, 1863, just 2 months after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, Abraham Lincoln appointed a National Day of Prayer. And in his proclamation to appoint that National Day of Prayer, he wrote the following. He said, "We've been the recipients of the choicest bounties of heaven. We've been preserved these many years in peace and prosperity. We've grown in numbers, wealth, and power as no other nation has ever grown, but we've forgotten God. We've forgotten the gracious hand which preserved us in peace and multiplied and enriched and strengthened us. And we've vainly imagined in the deceitfulness of our hearts that all these blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own. Intoxicated with unbroken success, we've become too self-sufficient to feel the necessity of redeeming and preserving grace, too proud to pray to the God that made us." And he encouraged the people who were at that point embroiled in a civil war to go back to God again. As they sought peace, as they looked for peace. And just a few months after this proclamation that Lincoln put out there between July 1st and July 3rd, the Civil War had experienced its most bloody battle at Gettysburg, with 51,000 casualties. At some point during that same year, the poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, reeling from the news that his son had gone behind his back and joined the Union Army to fight in the Civil War, he penned a poem which is called Christmas Bells. A lot of us know it for its use in the Christmas hymn, the Christmas song, "I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day," which we'll sing later on in the service. But the stanzas in that stand out to me, especially considering the context of Longfellow and what he was experiencing and the despair in his heart that he was experiencing when he penned these words. He wrote, "And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth. I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men." Now, by the grace of God, we're not embroiled in a civil war. And I don't know that any of us have sent loved ones off to fight. But I'd be hard-pressed to say that each and every one of us in this room is experiencing peace. I think if we're all honest, we could probably all use a little bit of peace. I don't know about you, but by the time that I get to this time of the year, I'm longing for peace. I'm longing to find a break. It feels for me like the fall season has gotten busier and busier and busier. My wife and I were talking the other day, and I heard her say something profound which has been sitting in my head, that when kids are younger, we drag them around to all of our activities, but at some point there's a switch as they get older, and they start dragging us around to all of their activities. And we're at the latter part of that journey rather than the former. Thanksgiving comes around, and I even said to some of the team earlier that I feel like even though Thanksgiving fell when it normally falls, it feels like as soon as it's done, Christmas is like knocking at our door. And it seems like peace, for me, is one of the most elusive things during this time of year. Peace on earth, have you experienced it before? And do we know what it even looks like? Is it something we found, and is it something that we can share with other people? When we hear the word peace, I think we most most of us would think peace is the absence of conflict. It means that all is right. Maybe harmony is another synonym that we might use to describe it. And we may say, especially in seasons like this, that we're looking for peace and quiet. We just want kind of a place to collect our thoughts and our ideas. And I think for some of us, peace has become more the absence of something rather than the presence of something. Instead of thinking that peace is just the absence of conflict, is there something more to this peace that we talk about, especially this time of year? If we look in Scripture, the Hebrew word that's most often translated peace is the word shalom. In fact, that has become a Hebrew greeting to say to somebody else, shalom, peace to you. But it's a much broader definition than just the absence of conflict. It means harmony or wholeness, completeness, or prosperity. Peace, as we see it in the Bible, God's peace, is about flourishing. It's about the pursuit of something. When the Israelites were in the wilderness, God spoke to them through Moses. And in Leviticus chapter 26, verses 6 through 8, we read those words. God said, I will grant peace, or shalom in the Hebrew, in the land, and you'll lie down and no one will make you afraid. I'll remove wild beasts from the land, and the sword will not pass through your country. You'll pursue your enemies. They'll fall by the sword before you. 5 of you will chase 100. 100 of you will chase 10,000, and your enemies will fall by the sword before you. And again, we can read a verse like that or a passage like that, and we can easily think, well, it's about conflict, it's about war and getting rid of those who are opposed to us, those who are against us. But there's something so much more, and you think about how the Israelites heard these words from God in the moment that they were in. They had been slaves in Egypt, they had been forced to do hard labor, and then Moses arose and he pulled them out of that promise, or out of that bondage. He walked them through the Red Sea, and there on the other side, while they're watching all their enemies drown in the ocean, they start and embark on this journey. They probably thought to themselves, like, we've got a leader, Moses, who's got anger issues. We're getting this crazy food that comes down from the sky. It only comes, every day, and I can't collect so much that I can save it. And then even on the day before the Sabbath, that's the only time that I can collect it. And it doesn't really taste like much anyway. And I'm wandering around, and there's sand in every part of my body. And they're wondering why in the midst of that, and how in the midst of that they can find peace. They keep being told by the priests, hey, you need to sacrifice. A blood sacrifice is required for your sins. And they find themselves at this place where their lives were marked by a constant disruption. They were never getting comfortable, wandering around but never quite arriving, always on the go. And I wonder, does that sound like our lives today? Can any of us relate to that feeling? That feeling that we're just kind of like a hamster on a wheel, running and getting nowhere. Or Sisyphus, the Greek mythology, myth of the guy who would push the rock up to the top of the hill. He thought he got somewhere, and then only to have it roll back down again. Can you relate? Have you felt like that before? Last week, when in our Advent reading, we read from Isaiah 9:6, where it said, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. He'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Shalom. Of the greatness of his government and peace," again, Shalom, "there will be no end." And today, Matt read for us from Isaiah 66, verses 12 and 13. I will extend what? Shalom, peace to you. To her like a river, and the wealth of nations like a flooding stream. You'll nurse and be carried on her arm, and dandled on her knee. I'll be honest with you. I thought I had a decent vocabulary, but I had to look that word up. I'm like, I've never, ever used that word before. And I'm glad that the version that Matt used did not use that. Did you hear what it said? He bounced on the knee. Why couldn't you have just said that? Anyway, I digress. As a mother comforts her child, so will I comfort you, and you'll be comforted over Jerusalem. After years of being in the wilderness and finally coming out of it, the disobedience of God's people causes a split in the kingdom, and the kingdom of Israel becomes the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, kingdoms of Israel and Judah, and there they are living in exile in a foreign land. They're longing for home, they're longing for peace or shalom. And they're given these words from God through the prophet Isaiah, speaking to them in the midst of where they are, in the midst of conflict and turmoil, in the challenge of exile. I wonder how those words sound to those of us who find ourselves in a similar predicament, or a predicament where we're just longing for peace. You think about the Israelites again. They had seen king after king after king who had done everything to make themselves better, to advance their own causes, and they've cared less about the people that they were supposed to be in charge of leading. Their lives were disrupted by even their leaders. Last week we kicked off this Advent season thinking about hope. That hope is always about something that's going to come. It's always the anticipation of something that hasn't quite arrived yet. And that in order to really find that true hope, it needs to be grounded in the promises of God. Because if we ground it in anything else, if we ground it anywhere else, then we'll be disappointed. We'll find ourselves frustrated. And even in this idea of the promise of peace, as we read through Isaiah and we're promised that the Prince of Peace will come, it's not so much this absence of conflict as much as it is a presence of something that leads to flourishing. God appeared to Moses, the one who led the Israelites out of Egypt into the wilderness and towards the promised land. And in Exodus 3:8, God said this, as Moses was there wondering, what on earth is going on? I'm seeing this burning bush that's not really burning. And God says, so I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. That's peace that God is describing to Moses. It's not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of something substantial, a good and spacious land, a land that's flowing with milk and honey. Paul, who wrote a significant part of the New Testament, having been raised in the Jewish tradition and the teachings of the prophets and the law, he understood this notion of peace. And in Philippians 4 verse 7, he wrote this, he said, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. The Greek word that Paul uses here is the Greek word eirene, which is the Greek equivalent of the Hebrew shalom. It's the word that we get our name Irene from. That was my mom's name. And Paul understood the power of eirene, of peace, of shalom. He understood that for those who are in Christ Jesus, that it was a transcendent peace. It was a peace beyond what we could even imagine. And it was a peace that somehow or another was able to guard hearts and minds, was to bring us to this place where anxiety and conflict and all other things that could lead us to bad places was it couldn't touch us. When I think about this idea of peace, I think about a baby asleep in their mother's arms. When was the last time you just watched, not in a creepy kind of way, but like watched a baby sleeping in their mother's arm? There's such a safety there, and it's like this envelopment. And you can almost feel that love and security that baby feels as they're sitting there in their mother's arm asleep. And I wonder for us, when's the last time that we experienced something like that? And maybe for some of us, the cynical like me among us have said, like, that is so impossible to even think about achieving that I'm just not even going to bother going for it anymore. That kind of peace is so out of my reach that, like, I'm not even going to think about it. But that's not what we're told. Paul tells us that God's peace can guard our hearts, can guard our minds, that eirene, that shalom. It can be a transcendent part of our lives, but we can't achieve it on our own. And I wonder where we found peace even close to this. People look for peace all the time, and if we're honest, if I'm honest, this peace again ends up being found in temporary things. We are very, very good at distracting ourselves as a society. We are very good at finding temporary peace. Whether it's in Netflix and whatever we're streaming there, whether it's in substances or other things, whether it's in relationships or the illusion of relationships. We're a distracted society that immerses ourselves in things that take our attention away from other things, and that's not the peace of God. That's not what Paul's talking about here. That's not what the Bible talks about in regards to peace. We need to be careful to understand, too, that peace, again, is not an absence of conflict. That's a very limited definition and description. It doesn't mean either that we don't experience hardships or troubles. Peace doesn't mean that, like, we just kind of coast through life and there's no issue at all. It means that when we go through life, and when we experience those troubles and hardships, we can actually rest like that baby. Because we realize that peace can't be conjured up by ourselves. We can't make it. We can't create it. We can't put it together. And I know I have that tendency sometimes to try to make it happen, or I come to a place where I think somehow or another, like, I need to get my stuff together before I begin to talk about it with other people. Like, I can't share peace because, like, I'm not experiencing it. If we all wait until we're actually perfect at something in order to start sharing it with somebody else, like, we're going to be waiting a long time. Let me lower your expectations a little bit here. I've had to do this for myself, but like, if you're waiting for that moment of perfection before you pass something on to somebody else, you're going to be waiting for a long time. One of my favorite passages in the Old Testament is Jeremiah 29. As the people of Israel were in exile, and probably thinking to themselves, I can't wait for that day. If I can just get to there, then things will be great. And God speaks to them through the prophet Jeremiah, and he says this in Jeremiah 29, verse 7. Also seek the peace, shalom, and prosperity of the city to which I've carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And it's interesting because if you go back and you look at the original language, the original Hebrew, there's not two words there, peace and prosperity. It's just one word. What word is it? Shalom. And the translators are trying to give it that broader, more robust description and definition by adding prosperity to it, because that's what God's peace is. It's transcendent. It's far bigger than this limited description that we've given peace. In some more traditional churches, on a regular basis, when they come together, they do what you would call passing the peace to one another. Now, we're mostly through COVID. I don't know if it's safe to say that or not, but I know that people are still not comfortable, especially now as we're, sniffling and sneezing and coughing and hacking, and some of us, are here with other family members who are home and whatever. So I'm not going to say, hey, go ahead and touch the people next to you, but I think this is something that we can practice this morning, this idea of passing the peace to one another. Like I said, there are some traditions, more liturgical traditions, where people will do this and they simply turn to their neighbor and they say, God's peace be with you. And then to which their neighbor responds, and also with you. So, hey, can we try that this morning? Just turn to your neighbor and say, God's peace, and we're going to all laugh. It's okay. It's uncomfortable. We don't do this a lot here. But you think about what this looks like, to even to do this on a regular basis. Here's what I don't want. Here's what I don't want for the branch. I don't want us to be people who pass the peace in here and then we peace out once we go. Okay? Because this passing of the peace isn't something that we kind of keep right here. We see that in Jeremiah 29:7. We're called to pass the peace, not just to brothers and sisters and branchers and people we like and love. We're called to actually pass that peace outside of here. That's what God said to Jeremiah and the exiles in Jeremiah 29. Seek the peace and prosperity of the place where I've planted you. Well, hey, somehow or another, God's planted you here. And we're not supposed to just keep that peace and pass it to one another here and have a nice little kumbaya circle. No. We can all sing Peace Like a River, it'll be like 1970 again and whatever. No. We're supposed to pass that peace on to others. And so, hey, maybe we'll incorporate this more often as a reminder to us that the peace that hopefully we experience, this peace of God that's transcendent, that's not created by us, that's beyond ourselves, that we can pass that on to one another and pass it on beyond here. And so I wonder, what are we doing to pass peace on to the people around us? Are we about our own peace? Because I guarantee you, if we are, then we're probably disrupting the peace of other people. But are we looking to actually say, hey, God's called me to pass the peace into the places where he places me? In my work, in my neighborhood, in my community, in my school, wherever it is, we're supposed to be people who pass peace. I'm not saying peacemakers. I'm saying passers of the peace. And it's a peace beyond us. It's a peace that only God could create. Where are we finding it? How are we passing it on to others? And so what do we do with this? We're asking these same questions every week during Advent. Just changing whatever word is. Last week it was hope. This week it's peace. So where is it that we need peace in our lives? Where is it? If we're really honest and if we really do some self-assessment and say, hey, okay, here's where I'm not finding peace. Some of us are high achievers. We're going to pull the whiteboard out and we're going to start marking it down and saying, hey, this is where I'm not finding peace. And then ask yourself, where do I find that peace? Or where am I looking for that peace? Where have I been looking for that peace? I think the other thing that we don't do a ton here that lends itself for this question is to come to a place of confession and confess to God, hey, here's where I've been looking for peace. And guess what? I've been coming up short every single time. And so ask yourself, where have I been looking for peace? And if it's not the peace of God, then just go before him and confess. He's not going to shame you. He's not going to say, hey, how dare you look for it somewhere else. He's going to say, my child, I will give you my peace. And then once we begin to understand where we're getting it from, not when we've perfected it, but when we begin to come to this understanding, we ask ourselves, how am I giving this away? How am I passing the peace on to other people? It's not an easy thing. And it requires a countercultural effort on our part to be people who are purveyors of peace in the midst of a world and a society that wants peace but doesn't want to find it in the place where it can be found. And we have this opportunity today to remind ourselves of where we find that peace. The church is called to pass God's peace on to others and to let them know where it can be found. It can be found in the Prince of Peace, who was born to a virgin, who lived, who died, who rose again, so that we might be recipients of that peace that he brings. I hope that you've found the peace of God today. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at thebranchashland@gmail.com. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, give us a review, and share with your friends and family. Thanks for listening. See you next time.